The Democrats attempted to Kavanaugh Pete Hegseth during today's confirmation hearing, but for every ambush, for every gotcha question, Pete Hegseth actually turned the tables on them and proved why he's the right man for the job. Now, in today's video, I'm going to go through the various moments that prove that the Democrats were just playing politics with today's hearing, and I think the moment that best encapsulates that is this gotcha question from Michigan Senator Gary Peters.
I don't know of any corporate board of directors that would hire a CEO for a major company if they came and said, you know, I supervised 100 people before. They'd ask you, well, what kind of experiences you had? We need innovation. Can you give me an experience or your actual experience of driving innovation in an organization? Give me an example of where you have done that.
Oh my goodness, Senator, absolutely. At Concerned Veterans for America, we created the Fixing Veterans Healthcare Task Force, a bipartisan task force that never been done before to create policy, to drive policy change on Capitol Hill that organizations fought ferociously against. We got the VA Accountability Act passed and the Mission Act passed in a way that a nonprofit of our size, veterans organization, has never done. And that's testified in all the letters that we put forward to the committee, which are on the record.
I have limited time. Thank you for that.
What I absolutely love about that moment is you could actually hear the excitement in Senator Peters' voice because he was so confident that he was going to trap. He was so certain he was going to gotcha Pete Hegseth. So when he asked, can you provide me examples of times that you've driven innovation in an organization? He was expecting Pete Hegseth to give a non-answer, to give some sort of fluff. But instead, Pete got nuanced, he got thorough, and he demonstrated not only his credentials, but his leadership that makes him qualified to be Secretary of Defense. So when that happened, you could see in Senator Peters' eyes, oh crap, I didn't realize he was actually going to answer the question. I didn't think he had two brain cells. Oh, we're going to change the subject here. And that happened time and time again. The Democrats tried to lay the trap, and once Pete Hegseth turned the trap against them and used it against them, they were like, no, we're going to change topic, change questions, change course, and they didn't acknowledge that Pete Hegseth blew their expectations, blew their questions out of the water. Another example of this is when Senator Elizabeth Warren tried to call, she didn't use the word, but she tried to insinuate to her colleagues that Pete Hegseth is a hypocrite. So she established that both her and Pete are on the same page as far as generals not working for the military-industrial complex after they leave service for a certain period of time. And Senator Warren attempted to call Pete Hegseth out on this, basically saying, you know, if it's good enough for the generals, why won't you commit to this? And Pete Hegseth's answer was so good that the entire room of Elizabeth Warren's colleagues actually started laughing at her. Started laughing with Pete, laughing at her. This is must-see television.
Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because it's not
think about it right now.
It's not one. My motivation for this job.
I understand that. I just need a yes or no here.
Come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be at the Defense Department.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. You're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the president is.
I'll bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
By the way, what is especially hilarious about that is that the Democrats claim that they can't differentiate between a male and a female. In fact, some Democrats can't even define what a woman is. Yet, to make her point, Elizabeth Warren wants you to know the difference between the goose and the gander. A female goose and a male goose. You can't make this stuff up. Now, there were a lot of things I learned during today's hearings, and one of those is that the Secretary of Defense is one out of two positions in the entire military chain of command where they come from civilian life. So according to Section 113 of the United States Code, there is a Secretary of Defense who is the head of the Department of Defense, appointed from civilian life by the president, by and with advice and consent of the Senate. Now, this just proves once again the brilliance of the founding fathers. And what they wanted to avoid is they wanted to avoid the military consolidating power and working within its own vacuum. So the fact that the Secretary of Defense comes from civilian life, the point there really is, we're creating checks and balances, even within our military system, even within the armed forces that are meant to protect us. It's to make sure that we don't fall under authoritarian rule. Now, the reason I bring that up is because part of the reason we don't want generals going into the military-industrial complex is, again, we want to minimize the potential for the abuse of power or for a conflict of interest. And so, yes, I think that was a fair question, but Pete Hegseth's answer, hey, I'm not a general. I haven't even thought about that. And, after this, he's going to return back to civilian life and he's going to have to make a living. So I think that his answer was perfectly valid. Okay, so we've seen the gotcha questions from Senator Peters and from Senator Warren. But Senator Gillibrand brought this to a whole new level. Forget about gotcha questions. This was an ambush and just a torrent of attacks. Pay attention, by the way, to who does most of the talking here.
In the DOD, everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering.
Senator Gillibrand, I thought the point of these confirmation hearings was to, let the candidate actually do some talking. But instead, what you did was get up on your soapbox and yap, 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 rant, 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 and didn't let Pete barely get a word in. If you have an issue with allegations, then bring up the allegations and let him defend himself. If you have issue with some of his quotes, then say that and ask if there's any context. Ask what he meant. If you have issue about his qualifications, then raise those issues and allow him the time to defend himself. If you were looking for a viral moment, you got it, but it wasn't in the way that you probably wanted because, quite frankly, you look like a fool. And no wonder the Senate, which used to be respected, their reputation is pretty much just as bad as the House at this point. Now, what made the Democrats look even worse, if that's even possible, is when Illinois Senator Duckworth started lecturing Pete Hegseth about, you need to do your homework. You need to be prepared before you sit in for these confirmation hearings. You need to do your homework before you come before us. And after she lectures Pete about doing his homework, she then shuffles for about 30 seconds, shuffles through her papers for 30 seconds, trying to find the paper so she can make her next point in attacking him. Again, you can't make this stuff up.
And I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who saved my life.
Also, I would just like to point out that all these Democrat senators seemed very angry. They were all yelling. Their hands were trembling or shaking. They just seemed really angry. How quickly They fell from the party of joy to whatever we saw today. Now, next was Senator Hirono from Hawaii, and she basically accused Pete Hegseth of being a drunk. Now, these allegations of him drinking at Fox News, I've already made a video debunking that, so if you want to check that out, feel free to. But what was notable about this moment is she's lecturing him about being a drunk, she's lecturing him about not drinking, and she's asking if he'll resign if he drinks on the job. But to me, she kind of sounded drunk when she was asking him these questions.
I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to
is
the dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
and-
who
I'm not
I work
hearing-
with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course. And frankly, as secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job, which is a 24/7 position?
I've made this commitment on behalf of
Will
the
you
men and women I'm
resign as
serving.
Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made this
you
commitment
drink
on
on the
behalf of
job?
the men and women I'm serving.
I'm not
because it's the
hearing-
most important deployment
I'm not
of my
hearing an
life.
answer to my question, so I'm going to move on.
He doesn't have to answer the question because he's saying he's making a commitment to not doing it, which means it's not even going to be on the table. Just following the logic there, not very difficult. Now, for all of these attacks that happened against them, the Republicans, for once in their lives, actually circled the wagons and actually defended one of Trump's nominees. So that was actually great to see. This is Senator Sheehy. Yes, I'm not making that up. Sheehy, Sheehy, from Montana. And I wanted to emphasize his last name because he asked Pete Hegseth a lot of questions. And two things before I get to this. There's a play on words that's early on. So very important to know his last name. Second of all, his line of questioning wasn't theoretical. It wasn't this big picture, 30,000-foot view type of questioning. It was very granular, very specific questioning. And it really impressed me that right off the top of his mind, Pete Hegseth knew all of the answers. And well, I'll play the clip first, then we'll circle back around at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are two genders.
I know that well. I'm a Sheehy, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell?
I know to a lot of people those questions seemed very random, or they seemed too granular, like who at a leadership level needs to know the answers to that. But that's exactly the point he was trying to prove, that sometimes the leadership is so much in their own bubble, so much in their echo chamber, that they don't understand anymore what it's actually like to be boots on the ground, to actually be on the battlefield. So the fact that Pete Hegseth just knew all of those answers immediately, that he's that well-versed in what it's actually like to serve, I think that really helps him have perspective for leadership, have not just, the theoretical and not just the global and not just the strategic, but also he's going to be managing an organization of 3 million people. actual human lives, each one of those lives just as precious as the next, just as valuable as the next. And so, there is a very human component to all of this. Yes, we want our leaders to be strategic. Yes, we want them to be strong, tough, and wise. We want them to abide by the Constitution. We want them to look after American interests. But they also have to know what's best for those that they're leading. And the fact that, to me, that Pete Hegseth demonstrated that level of understanding really stood out to me, and really, on top of everything else, inspired more confidence in him for this position. Now, even on CNN, they're already reporting that they expect that Pete Hegseth is going to be confirmed. And this is big news because Pete Hegseth, after Matt Gaetz dropped out as the nominee for Attorney General, most people thought that Matt Gaetz was sort of going to be the piñata, right? All the attacks were going to be on him. The Democrats, the media were going to focus on him. And so maybe some of the other controversial picks would sail through the nomination process. That was sort of the theory, right? Well, when Matt Gaetz dropped out, now Pete Hegseth is the most controversial nominee. And so it's a big deal because if Pete Hegseth sails through his nomination process, then that's good news for many others like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Kash Patel. Here's CNN reporting that they now expect that he's going to be confirmed.
What are you hearing from senators now that the Hegseth hearing is done?
The expectation that he will get confirmed. In fact, I just asked Senator John Thune, who's the Republican leader, the majority leader, decides the schedule of the United States Senate. I asked him about Hegseth's nomination. Thune has not said a ton about this nomination. I said, does he have any concerns about these allegations of sexual assault that Hegseth has denied but came up in today's hearing, about these allegations of misconduct and the like? And he indicated he does not. According to Thune, he said that Hegseth acquitted himself extremely well, and that he plans to move very quickly on this nomination. And it is moving quickly. We expect the Senate Armed Services Committee to have a vote as soon as Monday, Inauguration Day. That is according to the chairman of the committee, Roger Wicker, who told me that he believes that he'll get the support of all Republicans and be able to push this through.
Things definitely are moving quickly. And yes, his confirmation hearing was interrupted by a few Code Pink protesters at the very beginning. But by and large, it went swimmingly. It was really smooth sailing. And this is just a huge difference from Trump's first term. And so that gets me excited. Is Trump's first 100 days just going to be lightning in a bottle? Is it going to be, he's hammering and passing through his legislative agenda? I really hope so. It really seems something palpably feels more exciting, more energetic, and just more in command and control this time compared to 2016. Last but not least, Scott Jennings just was having a heyday, a field day over at CNN after today's hearings. And how could you not? Because Pete Hegseth really did an amazing job, I thought. But here is Scott Jennings just lauding his performance.
Well, in short, I think Pete Hegseth kicked their asses today. I mean, it wasn't even close. They didn't lay a glove on Hegseth. No mistakes, calm, cool, collected. I mean, before the thing even started, you had this Code Pink, protester freak show trying to disrupt the hearing. That's the Democratic base, by the way, which probably explains why the Democrats on the committee acted in such a bizarre and unprofessional way. I was appalled at some of the way these senators handled themselves and some of the lines of questioning. I mean, Tim Kaine sounded like a sex pervert in his questioning of Pete Hegseth. Blumenthal, who lied about his service in Vietnam, questioning Hegseth's qualifications. You had Gillibrand, you had Warren, you had Hirono going on unhinged rants about things. Angus King obviously doesn't understand what it's like to fight terrorism. On and on and on. Hegseth was cool in the face of this unhinged questioning. They made him look good today. It would be difficult for a Republican to vote against Hegseth after the Democrats' unseemly mudslinging today.
And not only was it unhinged questioning, but the Democrats actually exposed themselves for the hypocrites that they are. The best example of this was Senator Hirono. She was trying to make a big deal about the accusations of drinking on the job and of being an alcoholic, yada, yada, yada. Well, that's really rich when your candidate for president, Kamala Harris, has appeared to be drunk multiple times in the public, appeared to be wasted. Just saying. She was going to be president, which I don't know, seems like it's a bigger job than Secretary of Defense. I mean, they're both huge jobs, but the Democrats did themselves no favors with this. But as always, all of this is just my analysis and commentary. This is what's going on in the world of politics from my point of view, and I would love to hear from you. So what do you think about Pete's performance during his confirmation hearing today? Do you think he knocked it out of the park? Were you expecting more? Did it change your opinions one way or the other? And in addition to that, what did you think about the Democrat performance? Do you think that they were just doing their job, that this is par for the course for opposition, or do you think they misbehaved and lowered the standards for the type of discourse that should happen at these hearings? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't already, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. I know it's a simple thing to ask for, but it really does help me reach more viewers like you in the algorithm. Be sure to smash that subscribe button and to check out one of these videos.